everybody. It's Mr. Perry, and it's time to jump into one of the most important presentations of the school year, and it is AP Language Essay Basics. So I'm going to start with a little story here. When I was a high schooler, I got very good grades very easily. I did not have to try all that hard to do well. In particular, with my English classes. I was told from a fairly early age that my teachers told me that I quote unquote had a way with words. And, essentially what I found was that I could very easily wait until the night before an essay was due. I could knock something out without having, to try super hard. And I could just, I could get good grades pretty much every time. It was very easy for me to kind of skate by in high school. Now, I did not take any AP level classes when I was in school. That's important to keep in mind. When I was a student, I just kind of liked the idea of getting an easy A and keeping my GPA high. And I just never really worried about, taking AP level classes. That just sounded way too hard for me. Now, when I graduated high school, I did go to OCC and did 2 years there. And basically, when I was at Oakland Community College, I found pretty much the same thing happened. It was not very difficult, not very challenging. I could wait until the day before an essay was due. I could knock it out super quick, and I could get pretty easy high grades. Then, my junior year, I transferred to Michigan State University, and I remember very vividly that I had my first essay due for an English class. So, this was an upper level English class at MSU. The assignment was to read this really long poem, and it was about believe it or not, it was a poem about a man and a woman on a boat floating down a river. And there is some kind of assault that takes place. And at the end of the poem, or we were given an essay to write. Who is to blame? Do you blame the man for the assault, or do you blame the woman for the assault? And so when I looked at it, I said, well, the poem really kind of gives examples of both. It kind of seems like it's both her fault as well as his fault. And so I wrote this brilliant essay, really kind of stating that they were equally, culpable in the assault that took place. And thought it was brilliant, just expected to get a super easy A once again. Instead, I got that grade back and I got a D, and I could not believe it. I'm like, you have got to be kidding me. I have never once in my life gotten this low of a grade. I just, I kind of lost it. I didn't say anything to the professor, but I just remember fuming to myself. And so ultimately, I made an appointment to sit with my professor. I explained, very clearly, I'm like, I don't get these kind of grades. You have to tell me what was the main issue. And it turns out it was really kind of not a minor thing. He said that I could write well and that I definitely had talent, but he said my biggest problem was that my thesis was terrible. He's like, the essay assignment is who is to blame, the man or the woman. You can't say both, because if you say both, then you're basically contradicting yourself, and that's not good argumentation. And so what he taught me was to always take a clear side. And what that also taught me is that I had had it way too easy in high school and even at community college, that, when it came to what we consider effective college level writing, even though I had gotten lots and lots of great grades and wonderful praise from my previous teachers, I was not necessarily ready for the rigors of college level writing and the expectations of college level professors. So the good news is you are watching this video because you are taking this class, and my goal is to kind of put you through that rigor and hopefully save you, that headache of ending up in a college campus and going through the difficulty that I experienced. So we've already covered this once in class. I'm just going to remind you one more time, now that we're talking about essays. There are three main types of essays that you have to learn in my class. The first one is argumentation, or just argumentative. And in order to do well on an argumentative essay, you have to state a clear claim or thesis. And we are going to talk about the difference between high school level thesis statements versus college level thesis statements. That's coming down the road here a little bit. But then equally important, maybe even more importantly, you have to develop that claim with relevant and convincing evidence, drawing from personal experience or observation, or even from real world examples, statistics, data, whatever is relevant and whatever is important to supporting and developing that argument. You also have to learn what's called a synthesis essay, and a synthesis essay basically means take an argumentative essay, state your claim, all right, identify your college level thesis, but this time when you develop that thesis in your body paragraph, in your body paragraphs, what you're going to use are quotes and evidence from other reliable academic sources. So this is kind of like a research paper, except that it still is an argumentation essay from your point of view, and you're still going to state the claim and the thesis statement. You're still going to state the main points, but you're just going to draw from sources of information to support those main points. Finally, you have to learn what's called a rhetorical analysis, which is to take somebody else's piece of rhetoric, whether it's an essay or a speech or whatever it happens to be, and to analyze that rhetoric, to break it up into small bits and to really get into the meaning of those components. So analyzing and describing another author's use of rhetoric in order to make an argument, right? So these are your three essay types. And no matter what type of essay you're arguing for me or writing for me or for this class, you're always going to be graded according to the same content, all right? So now we're going to kind of break down all of the areas of the rubric that you'll see throughout this class. When it comes to scoring essays, the first area that you get scored in is called content and ideas. So this refers to, basically the ideas that are driving your thesis, your argument in general, your main point. How relevant and how well developed are your ideas and your content? Do you have adequate details in order to thoroughly explain the main points that you are making? And do you have a strong overall flow of ideas from beginning to end? So all paragraphs need to be well developed. I'm going to be showing you later in this presentation the extended body paragraph structure. And if you're sticking to the extended body paragraph structure, then you're probably scoring well in this category. Your main points in your body paragraph need to be supported with multiple details and thoroughly explained. So if you state a main point in your topic sentence, you want to make sure that you are really digging in and providing adequate evidence, multiple details, and thoroughly explaining what you mean. And then finally, again, that strong overall flow of ideas. You want to make sure that you're sticking to your arguments, sticking to your main points. You want to make sure that you have main points that build off of one another in a logical progression. You don't want to get caught up in going in any random tangents or going off on ideas that aren't necessarily related to the topic of that essay. So that's content and ideas. The next one is organization. This is the one you're probably familiar with the most. Organization is basically what you start to get taught in middle school. The whole concept of having an introduction, body paragraphs, and a conclusion, and also making sure that you have a clear thesis statement. You've been trained in that routine for many, many years now. Except when we get to AP and we're talking about organization, we're going to basically try to add some layers of sophistication to it, all right? So creative and unique methods of introduction. We're really going to spend a lot of time exploring what are some upper levels of introduction that we can use and start to incorporate as writers. The thesis statement needs to surpass high school level thinking, and again, this is something we're going to dig into in more concrete terms in the future here, in the near future. Multiple body paragraphs exploring various main points. Notice it doesn't say 3 body paragraphs. We're not necessarily tied to a 5-paragraph essay structure. You can score really, really well in AP level with 4 paragraphs. I've actually seen high-scoring 3-paragraph essays, although I will tell you that's very rare. And you might find you need 6, you might need 7 paragraphs to fully explain what it is that you're trying to say. It really depends, again, on the argument you're trying to make. Now, three-body paragraphs definitely is safe. It's a safe starting point, but don't feel like you always have to be tied to that very formulaic uh, five, five paragraph structure. And then with the conclusion, we do want to make sure we have conclusions. But again, what we're going to do is we're going to try to write conclusions that match the introduction in terms of power, style, and language. So as we're developing these really creative and poetic ways of starting our introductions, we're also going to strive to write conclusions that are equal to them, all right? Not something that's just, we're just throwing on there to say, in conclusion, blah, 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 boom, I'm done. So organization has a lot of the main components that you've seen before, except now we're going to try to add, again, layers of sophistication to them. Next, we spend a lot of time in this class talking about word choice and sentence variety or fluency. All right, in general, you're going to hear me use the word fluency very often. Fluency just basically means variety, right? We'll spend a lot of time early in the school year talking about developing a formal academic tone, which very much is tied to the word choice we are using when we're writing arguments. Very strong word choice, especially verbs. We're going to talk about using strong verbs, okay? That's a big part also of what we do in this class. Effective sentence variety, just basically showing that you know how to use short sentences as well as long sentences. You know, and again, being mindful of our sentence length and not making all of the sentences in a paragraph of a similar length, but adding again some variety and giving a little bit of fluency to our language. And then finally using transitions to give the essay a good flow of ideas. So word choice and sentence variety is another area of the rubric in which you'll be scored. No English class is complete without grammar and spelling, obviously. Now, of everything I've covered so far, grammar and spelling, of course, are very important, but I will argue that they are the least important. You know, most of us are in an AP English class because we have a good basic grasp of grammar and spelling rules. Now, I will teach you more grammar concepts, and I will try to address punctuation issues that arise as we continue throughout the class. One of my favorite things to do is to, you know, pull sentences from my students' essays. I always take your name off of anything that we look at, but we will look at, you know, if I notice a bunch of people are making similar grammar mistakes, or if we're all using the wrong word, you know, in the wrong context, or if we're all experiencing similar punctuation problems, then we'll look at some example sentences from various essays, and then we'll talk about how to address them, and more importantly, how to catch them when we are drafting and revising our essays or proofreading our essays. Grammar and spelling obviously is important, but you know, you can write an essay that is flawless with grammar and spelling. But if it's not, if you're not scoring well in content and ideas, organization, and then variety and fluency, then it's really hard to do well in this class. And then finally, this is probably the most challenging of them all. There is what I call this a variety of things. It's on the rubric, it's called critical thinking or unique perspective. I like to call this earning style points. The College Board folks will call this earning the sophistication point on their rubric. But basically, when we look at successful college level writing, we're looking at arguments that bring an extra deep level of critical thinking or some kind of fresh, unique perspective to the argument. The writing demonstrates a deep level of critical thinking. So this basically means the author, whoever's writing this argument, understands the little details as well as the big details. You know what I mean? They understand if we're writing about a social issue, they can write with confidence about why the social issue exists, and then they can drill down on the details and really dig into important points when they're developing their main point. Offers insightful, interesting, and intriguing ideas. Again, if you can bring kind of a fresh perspective to your argument and really bring up some thought-provoking ideas, that's another way to elevate the overall score of an essay. In general, we're going to try to avoid cliche statements, or we're going to try to avoid communicating a superficial understanding of an issue. So those of you guys who are well versed in history, for instance, or those of you guys who stay current with political issues and news stories, the people who do well in AP language are typically folks who, kind of have a good understanding of what the important social issues of today are, how they are tied to our collective history, and, how a lot of the conflicts of our past we are still experiencing today, and really kind of taking a critical eye at the role that leadership plays throughout it all. When we look at leaders of the civil rights era, leaders of the suffragist movement, leaders from the Revolutionary War, and the founding fathers, and various presidents and other political leaders from not only America, but from around the globe. We're constantly going to be looking at, what were the arguments being made, when were they being made, and how was the time period important. The more you know about the world when it comes to writing your essays, and the more you can bring that to the table as a writer, the better your odds are of earning this critical thinking, unique perspective, style points, sophistication point, whatever you want to call it. This is one of the biggest things that I think differentiates between college level writing versus high school level writing. All right, so now you have a pretty good, or at least you have you've had an introduction to the various essay types and the areas of the rubric that you will consistently be scored in throughout the year. Now let's go ahead and take that notes sheet that you have and flip it over, and let's just kind of do a review of essay structure and look at how AP Language is going to take a slightly different approach to this basic structure. Okay, so you might have seen this kind of diagram of essays before. For me, it works really well. This way of thinking about essays has always helped me, structure my ideas and give me a general approach, something that I can rely on anytime I have to write an essay. Now, you'll notice that this diagram, deceptively, is designed like a 5-paragraph essay. You'll notice it's got the upwards funnel for the introduction, the 3 blocks for the body paragraphs, and then the inverted funnel for the conclusion. But you will, whether you're writing a 3-paragraph, 4-paragraph, 5-paragraph, or I even once wrote a 45-page essay for my master's degree where I still followed this general structure. I still had my introduction, I still had my thesis, and instead of 3 body paragraphs, I had pages and pages and pages of body paragraphs, and then finally summarized it at the end according to this very similar structure. So, like I say, the 5-paragraph structure is taught and is a good thing to kind of fall back on if you aren't comfortable going outside of that. But I just like to point out that no matter how short or how long your essays happen to be, they always have those same components, or they always should have those same components. So for the introduction, it's a nice wide part of the funnel, and the idea is you want to catch as many people at the beginning of your essay as possible, and then you want to kind of slowly lead them towards your thesis statement. Your thesis statement, of course, is your opinion about whatever topic you're writing about, but you don't want to start by stating your opinion. You want to start by, again, casting a really wide net and trying to catch the attention of as many people as possible. So since you don't know who's going to read your essay always, you want to make sure that your opening statement about your topic is broad in terms of its appeal. And as much as you can, you want to try to intrigue the reader's thinking and really get them to visualize why your topic is important or why your topic is worth writing about. So using some kind of opening statement, some kind of recommended introduction strategy. We're going to get into upper level introduction strategies. All right, so try to be creative, try to be unique, try to really engage the reader by, I always say, write about your topic as if it is the most important topic you've ever written about. and really try to, like I say, use some powerful language choices. General details about your topic. You typically need to give a little bit of background about your topic, all right, after you've established your method of intro. Here's where you start to kind of lead towards your thesis statement by maybe just giving a few general details about that topic, and then boom, you hit them with your central claim or your thesis, whatever your teachers have called it in the past. We will call it thesis statement in here, which again is your central argument. That in general is the shape that your introduction paragraph should take. Next, we get into our body paragraphs. Now, body paragraphs should begin with transitions or transitional phrases, and then should also include transitions throughout the paragraphs. All right. Body paragraphs always start by stating a main point in the topic sentence, and then we are going to use what's called the extended body paragraph structure, where we elaborate on our main point, bring in a level of detail, some kind of supporting detail, and then you explain that supporting detail. Then you'll have, it says what, include at least one mid-paragraph transition, and then you'll bring in a second or maybe even a third level of detail, evidence to support your main point. And then finally, you have a concluding sentence. Typically, your body paragraphs are where you're going to earn a lot of the points on your rubric. If you have very well-developed, thoughtful body paragraphs, that does a lot to really elevate the overall score of an essay. So really plan out your body paragraphs ahead of time. Have a clear main point that is related to your thesis statement, but then have plenty of evidence to describe and to support that main point. So then you repeat that body paragraph structure as necessary until you've thoroughly argued your thesis. If you're sticking with 5 paragraphs, you would have a second main point and then a third main point. Some people ask about counterexamples. You might have been taught in the past that, if you're going to have a thesis statement and then you bring 2 main points, if you're going to have a counterexample, that, it's a good idea to maybe put that in the third body paragraph. I've seen very successful essays that address the counterexample in the introduction. I've seen very successful essays address the counterexample in the first body paragraph, and I've seen plenty of very successful essays, do it in the third. It's just kind of wherever it makes sense for you as a writer to bring up that counterexample if you think it's necessary. I've also seen plenty of very high-scoring essays that did not have a counterexample at all. So again, it just kind of depends on what you're writing about and whether or not you think a counterexample is worth bringing to the table. Finally, folks, we get to the conclusion paragraph. And in general, you've probably been taught, restate your thesis statement. And it's very important to reword your thesis statement. You go back to that introduction and you're like, okay, what's the idea? What is the one sentence that's really driving my argument? And then how can I reword it in different words here, but still remind the reader of the importance of this thesis statement? Typically, we're going to include some of the main ideas that we had in our body paragraphs, end with some final thoughts about the topic. But what I really challenge you guys to do is to what I call take your essay full circle. Mirror your introduction strategy if possible. And we'll get into this with some concrete examples here. But essentially what I say is when it comes to writing that last sentence or those last 2 or 3 sentences, go back up. Like after you've restated your thesis and after you've summarized your body paragraph main ideas, go back up and look at what was my creative, engaging method of introduction, and then see if I can steal some of these ideas or some of these words and then return to them in my final sentences. If you're able to pull off that move as a writer, that does a pretty good job of helping elevate your overall score. That's one of the moves that I really try to impress upon my writers. Okay, so at this point we've gone through the areas of the rubric in which you'll be scored, the different essay types, and now we've had a chance to look at the form and organization of essays at the AP level. Now what I want you guys to do is to take a minute and head to the class website. underneath this video, you will see the essay diagram with notes. You will see what's called the AP Essay 100-point rubric. This is definitely worth looking at. I call this this is the 9-point scale. I sometimes jokingly call it the dreaded 9-point scale. But in first semester, your essays are always scored. You're always given a number from 0 to 9. Now 0 means you didn't write an essay, so don't worry. 1 means it just really wasn't very good. It was way off topic and just didn't make any sense. A lot of my student writers at the beginning of the school year start at around a 3 or a 4 or a 5. I don't have many writers at the beginning of the school year who get much higher than a 5, but hopefully by the time the end of the semester rolls around, you'll see yourselves improving into that 6, 7, 8 range. And typically by the time the end of the semester or second semester starts, I've got most of my students able to score in that 7, 8, 9 range. But it does take work. It's not an easy overnight type thing. It takes a while to get up into that 7, 8, 9 range. So I would say, coming into the class, expect to be around that C or B range. If you're scoring in that C to B range, you're doing pretty good, all right? If you're below that C to B range, well then we're going to work with you and we're going to get you up in there. But just don't be surprised if that's kind of where you start. This again, the second page has the basic essay rubric. You can see kind of how the wording from the slideshow is embedded into your rubric. So this is just kind of that basic essay rubric that gets incorporated almost all of the time. There are some slight modifications made depending on the actual essay you're writing. This is the extended body paragraph. Definitely worth taking some time to read through this. We're going to actually practice this a little bit later on in the class. But if you're writing just a standalone essay, like if I ask you to write, if you're writing a standalone paragraph response, if I say write a paragraph about blah, 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 then it's good to get into the habit of writing your paragraphs kind of following this structure. And then when it comes to the body paragraphs of your essay, again, this is that general body paragraph structure that you typically want to strive for. It might not have to be as long as this all the time, but this does kind of give you an idea of what a well-developed college-level paragraph looks like. So it makes some general recommendations for, types of supporting evidence you can bring to the table. And then it goes through and it gives you an example of a body paragraph. I'm basically writing an extended body paragraph while also describing an extended body paragraph. And you'll notice a lot of the aspects that we just covered in the video are also evidenced in this particular paragraph. So this is worth having a look at and becoming familiar with, because we are going to get into it later on this week. But what I would like you to do next is to start digging into introduction strategies. So if you click over here on the Writing Center and then scroll down just a little bit, there's a couple of links here talking about introductions. All right, there are 2 websites with full-blown expectations of introduction methods and several excellent examples. One thing I will caution you against is that some examples do contain instances of informal language. So some of them will use the second person pronoun you and your, which is one of the things I'm going to ask you guys to try to avoid as writers in this class. So consider, if you see that in one of those examples, consider how that strategy might operate using formal language. But this one right here will take you to this website, which is an English composition class from a college level professor, getting into, again, what introductions should look like. And if you just jump down, here are some different examples that they're working with. And again, they've got, this is the method being illustrated, and then this is the example that goes along with it. So there are some really good ones here. I would recommend looking at, which ones you've used before and then which ones are kind of new. It's also definitely a good idea to look at where it says introductions to avoid. All right, useful to know what introduction methods are recommended. It's equally useful to know which methods we should avoid, because I do find that a lot of my students are stuck with these. A lot of my students have these as kind of their writing routines. The second link, this thoughtco.com, this has got some great stuff. 13 engaging strategies. This page has a lot of really interesting and intriguing methods of introduction. So definitely worth looking at what's here and kind of making some, if you want to make some supplemental notes, you can. But when it comes to coming up with some good introduction methods, then I just want to remind you that these examples are here, and I really think it would be great if all of my students took the time to look at these and kind of set some writing goals for yourselves. All right. You know, I want throughout by the end of the semester, you want to maybe try this method, and that method. Just you know, try experimenting with some new methods that you've never experimented before, and see if any of them can become habit forming for you. All right, folks, with that, you've got a lot of new perspectives on college level writing and what the essay expectations are in this class. I look forward to working on all of these skills with you guys as we continue. Have a great day, and thanks for watching.